The buzzards circled lower, their shadows dancing across Ophelia's cracked lips as she stumbled through the merciless Arizona sun. Her wedding dress, once pristine white satin, now hung in tatters, stained with dust and desperation. She'd been walking for 3 days since the stagecoach overturned, since the driver died, since her fiancé Cornelius had taken the last horse and abandoned her with promises he'd return with help. He never came back. Her knees buckled, sending her sprawling into the scorching sand. The vultures called to each other, patient as death itself. Through her delirium, she heard the soft thud of approaching hooves, not the salvation she'd prayed for, but something far more dangerous. The Apache warrior sat astride his paint horse, like a god of the desert, his long black hair catching the wind, copper skin gleaming with sweat and war paint. His dark eyes studied her with the intensity of a predator evaluating prey. When he dismounted and approached, every muscle in her body screamed to run, but she had no strength left. "Water," she whispered, her voice barely audible. He knelt beside her, tilting his head with curiosity rather than compassion. "You are far from your people, white woman." His English carried only the slightest accent, surprising her. "Why do you wander my desert dressed for marriage?" "Please," she gasped. "I'm dying." Kateni, for that was his name, meaning the one who waits, had indeed been waiting. The spirits had whispered of her coming, had shown him visions of a woman who would change everything. But destiny, he knew, always came with a price. He pulled a water skin from his horse and held it just out of reach. "I can save you," he said, his voice carrying the weight of absolute certainty. "But not as your rescuer. If you wish to live, you must become my wife. By Apache law, by sacred bond. There is no other way." Ophelia's fevered mind struggled to process his words. Marriage to a savage? Her Boston upbringing, her Christian values, her very identity rebelled against the notion. Yet as another wave of weakness swept over her, as the desert prepared to claim her bones, she found herself staring into eyes that held no cruelty, only an ancient wisdom and an offer of survival. "I don't understand," she whispered. "My tribe will not accept an outsider unless she belongs to one of us completely. As my woman, you are protected, fed, given purpose. As a stranger," he gestured to the circling vultures, "they finish what the desert started. The choice was death or a life she couldn't imagine." Her hand trembled as she reached for the water skin, their fingers brushing in a moment that seemed to electrify the very air between them. In that touch, something shifted. Not just her fate, but his as well. "Choose quickly," he said, though his voice had softened. "The sun shows no mercy, and neither does time." Ophelia closed her eyes, feeling the weight of 2 worlds pulling at her soul. "Yes." The word escaped her lips like a prayer and a curse combined. "I choose to live." Kateni's expression remained unreadable as he lifted the water skin to her mouth, allowing her to drink slowly, carefully. The liquid was warm but tasted like life itself. As strength gradually returned to her limbs, the full magnitude of her decision began to settle in. "There is no taking it back," he warned, helping her to her feet. "In accepting my proposal, you accept my world, my ways, my gods." "I understand," she lied, because understanding seemed impossible when survival was the only truth that mattered. He lifted her onto his horse with surprising gentleness, settling behind her so she wouldn't fall. As they rode deeper into the desert landscape, Ophelia felt the last threads of her old life unraveling. The woman who had boarded that stagecoach in Tucson, anxious to meet her merchant fiancé, was dying as surely as if the vultures had claimed her. "What's your name?" Kateni asked after miles of silence. "Ophelia Ravenswood. You will need a new name. Apache names carry power, meaning." "Ophelia." He tested the word. "It sounds like mourning. You are no longer mourning your old life. You are beginning." The Apache camp materialized from the landscape like a mirage made real. Hide teepees dotted a sheltered canyon, smoke rising from cooking fires, children playing in the shadows of towering red rocks. But as Kateni rode in with his pale burden, a hush fell over the settlement. Women emerged from their dwellings, their faces painted with suspicion. Warriors gripped their weapons tighter. An elderly woman with silver-streaked hair and eyes, like flint, stepped forward. From the way others deferred to her, Ophelia knew this was someone of importance. "Grandmother Jessica," Kateni said, dismounting and helping Ophelia down. "I bring my chosen woman." The old woman circled Ophelia like a hawk studying a wounded rabbit. She spoke rapid Apache, her tone sharp and questioning. Kateni's responses were equally swift, but Ophelia caught the edge of argument in their exchange. "She says you are weak," Kateni translated finally, "that white women cannot survive our ways, cannot bear strong children, cannot honor the spirits that protect us." "What did you tell her?" "That you chose death in the desert rather than dishonor, that you have survived 3 days where most would have perished in one, that the spirits themselves guided me to you." His dark eyes held hers. "But she will test you, Ophelia. They all will." As if summoned by his words, the tribe began to gather. Men, women, children, all studying her with expressions ranging from curiosity to outright hostility. She had never felt more exposed, more utterly alone than in that moment, surrounded by people whose language she didn't speak, whose customs were mysteries, whose acceptance could mean the difference between life and death. Jessica spoke again, gesturing toward the setting sun. She says, "If you truly wish to be Apache, you must prove it. Tonight, you undergo the first trial. You must spend the night alone in the sacred cave without food or fire, and emerge with a vision from the spirits. If they accept you, and if they don't," Kateni's jaw tightened, "then you are not meant to be here, and the desert will claim what it was denied." The sacred cave yawned before Ophelia like the mouth of some primordial beast, its depths swallowed by absolute darkness. Her legs trembled. Whether from lingering weakness or pure terror, she couldn't say. Behind her, the entire tribe had gathered to witness her trial, their faces painted orange and red by the dying light. "Do not let fear consume you," Kateni whispered, his breath warm against her ear. "The spirits test courage, not perfection. Show them you are worthy of the name I will give you." Jessica stepped forward with a bundle of sage, lighting it and letting the smoke curl around Ophelia's body. The old woman chanted in Apache, her voice rising and falling like desert wind. Though the words were foreign, their intent was unmistakable. A blessing, a protection, perhaps a farewell. "What did she say?" Ophelia asked. "She asked the spirits to be merciful if you are pure of heart," Kateni replied, "and to be swift if you are not." As darkness claimed the desert, Ophelia entered the cave alone. The opening sealed her off from the world she'd known, both her old life in Boston and this strange new reality among the Apache. In the suffocating blackness, time became meaningless. Minutes felt like hours, hours like years. The cold seeped into her bones first. Then came the sounds, scuttling things in the depths, the whisper of wind through hidden passages, and stranger noises that might have been voices or might have been her mind fracturing under the pressure of isolation. She thought of Cornelius, her abandoned fiancé, and felt nothing but disgust. He had left her to die without a backward glance, more concerned with his own skin than honoring his promises. How many times had she convinced herself his coldness was merely propriety? How often had she excused his casual cruelty as the ways of a successful man? Then her thoughts turned to Kateni. In his eyes, she had seen something Cornelius never possessed, a depth that spoke of genuine honor, of a man who would face 1,000 deaths before abandoning those under his protection. The realization struck her like lightning. She hadn't just chosen survival in accepting his proposal. She had chosen truth over comfort, passion over security. Hours passed, or perhaps days. Her stomach cramped with hunger, her throat burned with thirst. But something else was happening. The darkness was no longer empty. Shapes moved in the shadows. Not threatening, but watchful. She sensed ancient presences, spirits of the land that had witnessed countless generations rise and fall. A voice spoke to her, not in English or Apache, but in the language of the heart. It showed her visions. Kateni as a child, learning to hunt from his father, his first kill, his first war party, the day he became a man. She saw his loneliness too, the way other women of the tribe had failed to touch the deeper parts of his soul. He had been waiting, the spirits whispered, waiting for someone who could match his strength with her own. Then the visions shifted, showing her possible futures. She saw herself learning Apache ways, her pale hands growing strong and clever at women's work. She saw children, dark-haired, fierce-eyed, belonging fully to neither world but creating their own. She saw herself standing beside Kateni as they faced challenges that would test every fiber of their being. But there were darker possibilities too. Rejection by the tribe, death in childbirth, the constant struggle between two cultures that might never fully accept her. The spirits offered no guarantees, only choice. As dawn light began to seep into the cave, Ophelia understood. This wasn't about proving herself worthy of Apache acceptance. It was about discovering who she truly was beneath the layers of Boston propriety and civilized expectations. In the desert, facing death, she had chosen life. In the darkness, facing the unknown, she was choosing love. She emerged from the cave as the sun crested the canyon walls, and the entire tribe was waiting. Her dress was filthy, her hair wild, but her eyes blazed with newfound purpose. Kateni stepped forward, searching her face for what she had found in the darkness. "I saw you," she said simply. "I saw us." For the first time since she'd met him, the Apache warrior smiled. "She is no longer Ophelia," Jessica announced to the gathered tribe, her voice carrying the authority of one who speaks for the spirits. "The cave has shown us her true name. She is Ayana, eternal bloom, for she has died to her old self and been reborn among us." The ceremony that followed was unlike anything from Ophelia's, no, Ayana's, former life. No church, no white dress, no organ music. Instead, the tribe formed a circle around a blazing fire as the sun reached its zenith. Kateni appeared dressed in traditional regalia, beaded buckskin, eagle feathers in his hair, his face painted with symbols she was learning to read. Jessica bound their hands with strips of leather while chanting ancient words. "What the spirits join, let no man separate," she declared in English for Ayana's benefit. "What the earth witnesses, let the sky remember." They drank from a shared cup of bitter ceremonial tea that made Ayana's vision swim with colors she had no names for. When Kateni kissed her, sealing their union, she tasted smoke and sage and something wild that spoke of desert storms and endless horizons. But their happiness was short-lived. 3 days after the ceremony, scouts brought word that chilled every Apache heart. Soldiers were coming, led by a man with pale eyes who claimed the tribe had kidnapped a white woman. The description could only be Cornelius, her former fiancé, riding with a full cavalry unit. "He wants you back," Kateni said, his jaw tight with controlled fury. "Or he wants revenge for taking you." "I was never his to begin with," Ayana replied. But she knew her words meant nothing to men like Cornelius, who saw women as property to be claimed and reclaimed at will. The War Council convened that night. The debate was fierce. Some wanted to flee deeper into the mountains. Others advocated for a fight. A few suggested returning the white woman to avoid bloodshed. Ayana sat beside Kateni, understanding more Apache now, but still relying on his translations for the complex discussions. "They speak of you as if you are not here," he murmured to her during a heated exchange between two war chiefs. "Some believe you will betray us when the soldiers arrive, that your loyalty belongs to your own people. What do you believe?" His answer came not in words, but in the way his hand found hers, their fingers intertwining with the certainty of souls that had chosen each other freely. When Kateni rose to speak, the cave fell silent. His words were measured, powerful, carrying the weight of a man who had earned his place through deed rather than birth. Though she couldn't understand every word, Ayana felt the passion in his voice, saw the way other warriors leaned forward to hear him. He tells them you are no longer white, no longer their concern, whispered Nalnish, a young woman who had become Ayana's closest friend among the tribe. He says you chose this life, chose him, chose us, that to give you back would be to break sacred law. But Jessica stood, her aged voice cutting through Kateni's eloquence like a blade. The argument that followed was intense, gestures sharp, voices raised. Finally, the old woman turned to Ayana directly. She says the choice must be yours, Nalnish translated. You can return to your people, live in safety, have the life you were born to. Or you can stay and bring war to our children. She asks, what does your heart tell you? Every eye in the cave fixed on Ayana. In the firelight, she saw faces that had become dear to her. Nalnish's gentle smile, young Kuruk's mischievous grin, even old Jessica's stern but fair expression. These people had given her a new name, a new life, a purpose she had never imagined, in her Boston drawing rooms. But mostly she saw Kateni, waiting for her answer with the patience of a man who would accept whatever she chose, even if it destroyed him. Tell them, she said, rising to her feet, that Ophelia Ravenswood died in the desert 3 days before her wedding. Tell them that Ayana, wife of Kateni, daughter of the Apache, will never leave her people. And if Cornelius wants to take me, he'll have to kill every warrior in this tribe first. The silence that followed her words stretched taut as a bowstring. Then Kateni's whoop of joy split the air, echoed by the war cries of every man in the cave. The battle lines were drawn. The cavalry arrived with the morning sun, their brass buttons and steel weapons glinting like stars fallen to earth. Cornelius rode at their head, his pale eyes scanning the Apache encampment with the calculating gaze of a man who saw only obstacles to be removed. Ayana watched from the canyon rim as Kateni rode out to meet them, accompanied by Chief Goyakla and 2 other war leaders. The parley was brief, voices carrying up the stone walls even if the words were lost to distance. She could see the moment when negotiations failed, the stiffening of shoulders, the reaching for weapons, the careful backing away that preceded. Violence! He refuses to leave without you, Nalnish said, having crept up beside her. The yellow-haired man with the cold eyes. He says you were taken against your will, that white women cannot legally marry savages. Legal! Ayana spat. As if law mattered more than love. Below, the soldiers were forming a battle line, 40 men against a tribe of perhaps 60 warriors. But the Apache had the advantage of terrain and desperation. Still, Ayana knew that victory would come at a terrible cost. Blood would stain the desert sand. Children would lose fathers. Mothers would weep for sons who died defending a woman they had only just accepted. The first shots rang out as the sun reached its peak. From her vantage point, Ayana could see the battle unfold like some terrible ballet. Apache warriors flowing like shadows between the rocks, soldiers firing in disciplined volleys, horses screaming, men falling. Smoke drifted up from the canyon floor, carrying the acrid smell of gunpowder and something worse. She lost sight of Kateni in the chaos and felt her heart stop. Then she spotted him, alive but wounded, blood streaming from his shoulder as he fought with the fury of a man protecting everything he loved. Near the center of the fighting, Cornelius sat his horse like a general surveying his domain, directing his men with pointing gestures and shouted commands. The battle raged for hours. As the sun began its descent, it became clear that neither side could claim victory. Too many lay still on the ground. Their stories ended in dust and violence. The surviving soldiers had taken shelter behind their dead horses, while the Apache controlled the high ground, but could not dislodge their enemies without catastrophic losses. As shadows lengthened, Ayana made her choice. Ignoring Nalnish's protests, she began climbing down the canyon wall, following goat paths that seemed too narrow for human feet. Her destination was the battlefield below, where her 2 worlds were destroying each other over her fate. She emerged between the opposing forces like an apparition, her white dress, now stained with desert colors, making her visible to both sides. The shooting stopped as if by magic, every gun falling silent as soldiers and warriors alike stared at the woman they were dying for. Enough! Her voice echoed off the canyon walls, carrying the authority of someone who had found her power. In the most unlikely place. Cornelius, face me if you have any courage left in that merchant's soul. Her former fiancé urged his horse forward, his pale eyes bright with fury and possession. Ophelia, thank God. These savages, what have they done to you? They saved my life, she replied. They gave me a name, a purpose, a love worth dying for. What did you ever give me except empty promises and a marriage contract? You're not thinking clearly. The trauma, the captivity, will get you proper medical attention once we return to civilization. Ayana laughed, the sound sharp as breaking glass. Civilization? You mean the world where women are property to be traded between fathers and husbands? Where love matters less than social standing? Where a man can abandon his bride-to-be in the desert and call it prudence? Cornelius's face darkened. I came back for you. You came back with soldiers and guns because your pride was wounded, not your heart. I don't believe you have one. She turned to address both sides, her voice carrying across the killing ground. I am Ayana, wife of Kateni, daughter by choice, of the Apache people. I will not be taken. I will not be traded. I will not be used as an excuse for more bloodshed. If you want war, find another reason, because I am exactly where I choose to be. The moment stretched, taut, balanced on the edge of a blade. Then Cornelius drew his pistol, and Ayana saw her death in his eyes. The gunshot shattered the desert silence, but it was Cornelius who fell from his horse, clutching his shoulder as blood seeped between his fingers. Kateni stood 30 yards away, smoke rising from the barrel of his rifle, his dark eyes blazing with protective fury. The next shot won't be a warning, the Apache warrior called out in perfect English, his voice carrying the deadly promise of a man who had nothing left to lose. The remaining cavalry soldiers shifted nervously, their leader wounded, their mission suddenly unclear. Captain Morrison, the unit's commanding officer, rode forward with his hands visible, trying to salvage a situation that had spiraled far beyond his control. Ma'am, he addressed Ayana directly, are you being held against your will? Blink twice if you need rescue. Ayana stepped closer to Kateni, taking his free hand in hers. Captain, I appreciate your concern, but I am exactly where I wish to be. This man is my husband by Apache law and by my own free choice. Any attempt to rescue me would be kidnapping. Apache law isn't recognized by the United States government, Morrison replied, though his tone suggested he was grasping for legal ground in a situation that had moved far beyond legal niceties. Then perhaps it's time your government learned to recognize something more important than its own narrow definitions, Ayana shot back. I am a free woman making a free choice. Or do your laws only apply to freedom when it's convenient? Cornelius struggled to his feet, supported by 2 soldiers, his face twisted with pain and rage. She's been brainwashed, tortured. No decent woman would choose to live like an animal. Animal? Kateni's voice dropped to a whisper that somehow carried more menace than any shout. He spoke rapid Apache to his warriors, and suddenly the canyon walls came alive with rifle barrels and arrow points, all trained on the soldiers below. Chief Goyakla rode forward, his weathered face grave. He spoke to Captain Morrison in careful English, each word chosen with diplomatic precision. Your government makes treaties, then breaks them. You promise peace, then bring war. Now you come for our women with lies about rescue. She's not your woman, Cornelius began. But Morrison cut him off with a sharp gesture. The captain studied the situation with the calculating eye of a professional soldier. He could see the Apache had them surrounded, could count the odds that none of his men would leave this canyon alive if fighting resumed. More importantly, he could see that the woman they'd come to rescue was defending her captors more fiercely than they defended themselves. Ma'am, he said to Ayana, I need to ask you directly, in front of witnesses from both sides. Are you Ophelia Ravenswood of Boston, formerly engaged to Cornelius Whitmore? I was, she replied. That woman died in the desert when her fiancé abandoned her to save his own skin. I am Ayana, wife of Kateni, and I choose to remain with my people." Morrison nodded slowly, then turned to Cornelius. "Mr. Whitmore, it appears the lady has made her position clear. As she is of legal age and sound mind, I have no authority to force her to return against her will." "This is insane," Cornelius sputtered. "She's been seduced by a savage, turned against her own kind." "Her own kind," Kateni said quietly. "Left her to die." The truth of those words hung in the desert air like smoke from a dying fire. Everyone present knew the story, how Cornelius had taken the last horse when the stagecoach overturned, promising rescue that never came. His abandonment had driven Ayanna into the arms of the Apache, and his wounded pride had brought soldiers to die for his mistake. Captain Morrison made his decision. "Mr. Whitmore, you'll need medical attention for that shoulder. Sergeant Williams, prepare the men to withdraw." "You can't just leave her here," Cornelius protested. "I can and I will. The lady has made her choice, and it's not my place to override it." Morrison tipped his hat to Ayanna. "Ma'am, I wish you well, whatever path you choose." As the soldiers prepared to depart, Ayanna felt something she had never experienced in her former life, the absolute certainty that she was exactly where she belonged. The desert had stripped away everything false about her, revealing a woman strong enough to choose love over safety, truth over comfort. Kateni's arm slipped around her waist, and she leaned into his strength, watching her old life ride away, in a cloud of dust and bitter regret. 5 years later, Ayanna stood on the same canyon rim where she had once watched soldiers and warriors spill blood over her fate. Her hands rested on her swollen belly, their third child growing strong within her, while 2 dark-haired children played at her feet. Little Naicha, now 4, had his father's eyes and his mother's stubborn spirit. Baby Desba, barely walking, possessed the fearless curiosity that would make her a formidable woman someday. The Apache had moved their camp deeper into the mountains as white settlements crept ever closer to their traditional lands. But here, in this hidden valley, they had found a measure of peace. Ayanna had become more than just Kateni's wife. She served as a bridge between worlds, her ability to speak both languages and understand both cultures making her invaluable. To the tribe's survival, the trading post sent word. Nalnish called up from below, now a mother herself and Ayanna's closest confidant. "They have the medicine you requested for Jessica's cough." Ayanna smiled, remembering how the old grandmother had once viewed her with such suspicion. Now Jessica doted on her great-grandchildren and claimed credit for the match, insisting she had seen its wisdom from the beginning. Time, it seemed, softened even the hardest hearts. As she made her way down the path, Ayanna reflected on how completely her life had changed. The woman who had once worried about proper tea service and marriage prospects now knew how to track deer, prepare traditional medicines, and negotiate with traders who often tried to cheat the Apache. Her hands, once soft and white, were now brown and calloused, marked by honest work and the kind of strength that came from building a life rather than simply living one. Kateni emerged from their teepee, and even after 5 years of marriage, her heart still quickened at the sight of him. He had aged well, wisdom tempering the wild edge that had first attracted her, but his eyes still held that depth that had called to her soul in the desert. "The council has made a decision about the government's latest offer," he said, his expression troubled. Ayanna knew what he meant. Washington had been pressuring all Apache bands to relocate to reservations, promising safety and supplies in exchange for their freedom. It was a devil's bargain that would spell the end of their traditional way of life. "And?" she asked, though she could read the answer in his face. "We move deeper into Mexico, find new lands where the white man's law cannot reach us." It meant leaving everything again, starting over in an even more remote location. It meant her children would grow up knowing only exile and the constant threat of pursuit. But it also meant preserving their culture, their independence, their right to live as they chose. "When do we leave?" she asked simply. Kateni's smile was answer enough. This was why he had chosen her, why the spirits had guided him to a dying woman in white satin. She didn't ask if they could negotiate, didn't suggest compromise or surrender. She asked when they would leave, because their fate was shared, their path chosen together. That night, as they made love under stars that knew no national boundaries, Ayanna thought about the woman she had been. Ophelia Ravenswood would have been horrified by this life, the uncertainty, the hardship, the complete absence of the security she had been raised to value above all else. But Ophelia had been a ghost, a hollow creature shaped by other people's expectations. Ayanna was real. Ayanna was free. As dawn broke over the mountains they would soon leave behind, she felt their unborn child stir within her womb. This little one would be born on the trail, born into a world that might never offer safe haven, but would always offer choice. The thought filled her not with fear, but with fierce joy. The desert had taken everything she thought she wanted, and given her everything she had never known she needed. Love, purpose. A strength she had never suspected lay sleeping within her, civilized heart. She had been lost once, dying in the merciless sun with buzzards circling overhead. Now she was found, complete, exactly where she belonged. The Apache had a saying, "The earth does not belong to us, we belong to the earth." Ayanna understood now that she had never belonged anywhere until she belonged here, to this man, to this people, to this wild and unforgiving land that had taught her the difference between surviving and truly living. The sun rose on their last day in the valley, painting the sky the color of hope and endings and new beginnings all at once. Soon they would move on, seeking that horizon where freedom still existed for those brave enough to claim it, and she would follow, as she had always followed, the voice of her heart calling her home.